In this Let's Create series, we're creating a lights out puzzle game. In the last episode, we created the game board and enabled the toggling of individual tiles. In this episode, we'll implement the light toggling logic for the game and get a basic game loop set up. Let's get started. Now we want to implement the tile toggling mechanism. There are two different variations that we want. The first is when we start the game, we'll be in the level select mode. Here, clicking on a tile highlights that tile, which will represent the level, and all of the other tiles toggle off. When we're in the game mode, we'll toggle the press tile and the 4 surrounding tiles around it. We're starting in the GameManager.cs script. Let's create an enum called GameMode to store these states in. You may be considering a boolean for this, as we're either in game mode or level select. However, I find it's always useful to have a third option for do nothing. This is because pause menus, game start and end animations, or things like that often require you to stop interactions. So we'll add 3 things to our enum: level select, game, and none. Then we'll create a serialized private field of type game mode called game mode, which we default to none. Again, this is serialized so we can toggle it in the inspector for now to test things work as expected. Now let's create a toggle method that will perform the light toggling based on the game mode we're in. This is going to be a public function because we want to call it from the tile. Tile is basically going to defer all the logic to the game manager as to what happens when a tile is pressed. This will take 2 variables, row and col, so we know which tile was pressed. We compare our game mode variable. If we're in the game mode, then we want to toggle the press tile, which we can do by calling tiles row col.toggle. Then we want to toggle all the surrounding tiles too. We'll do them all individually, and for each there will be a condition. First we'll go to the left, so col -1. This can only happen if the column we pressed was greater than 0, as there is no -1 column. Then we just do tiles row col -1.toggle to toggle it. Similarly, for the right point, we can only toggle if it's not in the rightmost column, i.e. col +1 is less than none cols. Then we do exactly the same thing for the up and down, making sure we don't go out the bounds of the game area for the rows. Then our next case is if we are in the level select game mode. In this case, we want to ensure the press tile is the only one lit up. So we first iterate through all the tiles, turning them off using set state and passing false. Then turn on the press tile by passing true to set state. This isn't optimal. We'll be setting things off that are already off. But to keep the game simple, we're not tracking lit tiles, so this will do just fine. We need to call this from the tiles, so let's jump over to the tile.cs script. First, we need 3 new private variables. These are for the game manager, row, and column. What we'll do is create an initialisation method where we set these on creation, and then we can use them later. So create a new public method called init, so it can be called from the game manager. This is a void as it doesn't return anything. This takes 3 variables, the game manager, row, and col. All it does is simply set our local variables with the past ones. Again, I'm using this dot for the local ones to disambiguate them as they have the same name as the past variables. Then at the bottom of the file, we need to update the onMouseDown method. Instead of calling the tiles toggle method, we'll update this to call the game manager's toggle, with all the logic we've just implemented. Now back in the GameManager.cs script for a final time, we just need to update the tile creation to call our new init method. So in the start method, after we've created the tile and position, we'll do a call to init. The first argument is the game manager. As this is being called from the game manager, we can pass this, which passes a reference to our current object, which is the game manager. Then we simply pass row and col. That should be it for the code. Let's jump back into Unity and test this out. On starting, we defaulted the game mode to none, which means clicking on any of the tiles has no effect. If we change it to level select, you can see it means we only have 1 light lit up at a time, and clicking on an already lit light doesn't change anything. Finally, changing it to game mode, we can see that the light toggling logic is working, toggling the click tile and the 4 adjacent ones too. Now we have all the core mechanics we need for the game. We just need to flesh it out a bit. The final thing we're going to do in this episode is set up a start button. So we'll right click, UI button. This version of Unity, they're all TextMesh Pro ones now. If this is the first TextMesh Pro item you've imported, you'll get the pop-up asking you to import the required package bits to make it work. We can press Shift F to align our view to the canvas so we can see it properly. First thing, we want to align the button to the bottom center of the screen. So click on the anchoring widget, hold down Alt so it also sets the position, and center it to the bottom. Let's just switch to the game view so this is easier to see how it looks. The button is far too small and too near the bottom. We can lift it away from the bottom by setting the pos Y to something like 150. We could adjust the height and width of our button to make it a better size, but that would also require us to update the text too. Far easier, let's just update the scale. Click the lock icon to adjust the scale all at once, and you can make this bigger. I chose 5. Expand the button under the canvas to expose the text element. Here we can change the text to Start Game. I'll also rename the button to Start Button just to make it clear what it does in case we need to add any more buttons in later. We're going to want the on-click logic of this button to do something, so let's jump into the GameManager.cs script and add some logic to start a level. Firstly, we'll add a new private int called level to our variables, which will default to 0. Later on we'll implement lots of levels, but for now we'll just hardcode a single level to get things going. We create a private read-only array of type list that contains tuples. That's a bit confusing, I know. The idea is that eventually we'll have 25 levels in this array, and each level is simply a list of the row col coordinates of the lights that start lit. To this, we'll add our first level. The rows count from the bottom. Hopefully you can visualize what this looks like. If not, don't worry, we'll see it later. Let's create a method to start the level called StartGame. This is public, so it can be called by other things, which will be the button in a moment. First thing we want to do is clear any set lights. Then we want to set lights for our particular level. For this, we'll use a for each loop, taking the tuple of int row and int col in the levels array using the index of level. As the levels is a list of tuples, this basically iterates over the points we need to set to lit. So we can call tiles rowcol.setState passing in true. We've indexed the levels using our level global variable, which we set to 0. So this always takes the first level. We've only added one anyway. In the next video, we'll implement the level selection logic and all of the rest of the levels. For now, we just want one to see how it works. The final thing to do is set the game mode to game so that the toggling lights logic will start once you've started the level. Let's jump into Unity and hook this up to the button. Select the start button, and then in the on-click section, we use the plus icon to add a new action. For the object, we'll drag in our Game Manager object. Then in the function, we can select Game Manager and choose Start Game. So when the button is pressed, this method will fire. Let's hit play so we can check this out. You can see when you press Start Game, the lights for the level show up. And the click is toggling the lights as we expected. You can press Start Game again to restart the level or when you finish. We're going to stop there for this episode. In the next episode, we'll add 25 unique levels and implement the checking of the wind condition. I hope you found this tutorial useful in some way. As ever, the full code is available on GitHub and linked in the description below. See you next time.